Live, the show that sometimes happens.
Yeah.
Let me just check.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so MonsterTalk Live, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/MonsterTalk.
We need
I'm
a
Blake
lot of
Smith.
support.
Yeah.
I'm Karen Stolzner.
And we have a guest.
Yes, a recurring guest.
It seems that way. We come back every Sunday.
Every week now.
to like drink Spindrift and talk.
Well, welcome, Allison Jornlin. We had you on the show. How long ago was it now? It was
I think
couple of years ago?
It was 2 years ago, yeah.
About the Chicago Mothman story,
Yes.
which is still ongoing.
Yes.
Which is the deep dish of Mothman, right? So that's
that's right. The deep dish of Mothman debacle. Yes.
hey, we probably won't be able to do, because we've had to change platforms to get things going tonight. Thanks a lot, Zoom, YouTube integration. So we won't be able to probably do our screen sharing tonight, but we do have.
Okay.
But we can probably put some stuff in the show notes later to go along with this, because you got a really nice presentation. Well, you want to tell us a little bit about how this presentation came to be?
Yeah. So, well, I'm Allison Jornlin. I'm a paranormal investigator, and I have been in the field for about 20 years now. And I just wondered about women in the paranormal, about the history of women in the paranormal. And because when you watch paranormal TV, you don't really see much of that. You see Zach Baggins, or you see someone else with a lot of machismo, and I wondered, is that the way paranormal investigation has always been? And I for a long time have revered Charles Fort. And if you don't know who that is, that's he was a 20th century writer and researcher. He spent a lot of time in the New York Public Library researching anomalies. So he, it wasn't like today where we have all of this spectacular technology, and you can research from your home. He actually had to go to the library and go through the papers, and I assume he had microfilm, but that's about it. And so he went through journals and all types of periodicals, combing through them to find anomalies, and then wrote 4 extraordinary books. And he's known as the man who invented the supernatural. There's actually a book on that title.
Does that, one of his books is called Low, which I guess makes him like the original low writer.
Good one. The puns are starting early. So Jim Steinmeier wrote this biography of him, and it's called Charles Fort, the man who invented the supernatural. So if he's the father of the paranormal, I wondered, who was the mother of the paranormal? Mm-hmm. And we can talk about that in a bit. But so I want to address, before we get started, because I know that some of my friends out there and some of my frenemies out there might be wondering, why am I on a skeptical podcast? Allison, why are you talking to our enemies? And I guess I just don't see it that way. I think that it's okay for people to have different points of view. I mean, that might be a way out concept.
Oh, really? Well, actually, no.
Actually, it's not okay to have your own point of view. So I think this is how we learn. We talk with each other. We learn about each other's positions. And, I think that's what makes the world go around. I mean, that's where advances come from, is being able to talk to people of different viewpoints. So that's why I'm here. I'm not here because, and this is to my detractors, I'm not here because I want to become a professional skeptic. No,
whatever that is.
I'm still a weirdo. Not that you guys aren't weird. I mean,
Blake's professional.
Blake's plenty weird.
We've got a lot of common ground. We're interested in the same things, and
you guys love monsters.
Absolutely.
do.
And
Yeah,
skeptics
yeah.
pride themselves on being open-minded. So, not all skeptics are, but I mean, this is the second time we've had you on the show, and we've got a lot of similar interests. And this is certainly an interesting topic because it's something that is just not talked about by skeptics. I think once this comes out, suddenly there'll
Not
be
by
a
the
lot
guys.
of. Sorry?
So not by the guys.
Yeah, it's a sausage fest. That's true.
But I think it's great that we are able to talk and disagree in a civil manner. And I think that's a good example.
We agree for the most part, I think.
Oh yeah, I think so too. And I think there's more commonality than there is separation. And I've loved your show for years just because, it was always fun to listen to different perspectives. And then every once in a while you'd have a guest on that would drop something on you like, well, I think orang pendek is real. And you'd be like, wow. And I'd be like, oh my God, something really monumental happened on MonsterTalk. But, right at that point, you weren't on video, so we couldn't see like Blake's head explode
expression on our faces.
Well,
yes, right.
We don't. I grew up in a very sarcastic family, so
did you?
Did I? I don't know. So no, but there's a lot of eye rolling in my family, so you don't see that on the podcast, and I try not to do it in real life. But it's just like I don't know if that's coming through on the video, but my sisters, man, they can roll their eyes, and we're very sarcastic. But you're right. No, having common ground, we all, as you say, we have the same interests, regardless whether we believe the same things. But I think even with a few exceptions, most people want to have evidence. I mean, most people want to see things actually proven. Yeah. And
that's what we're both seeking.
Yeah. And we both, I think, I mean, it's been really hard to come to that point where you have to say, well, sometimes we don't know, and sometimes there is no answer. I don't need to make up an answer to fit my skeptical needs. I don't need to make one up to fit my believer needs. I just need to say sometimes, I don't know.
And skeptics should be able to say that. And Blake and I try to.
And that's what I love about you guys.
We don't know a lot.
I don't know.
And that's really the common ground that these women that I'm going to talk about tonight have. They wanted to believe. Even some like Rose Mackenberg, who we'll talk about in a little bit, who worked with Houdini, she wanted to believe. So a lot of these women, were at that point where they were researching things that were paranormal, but and they may not have found paranormal explanations for them, but they were interested enough that they thought this deserves real investigation. And I think that's where you guys are too. So that's what I'm talking
absolutely. And a lot of these women were living in times where belief was prevalent. That was the norm. But I guess we should start by talking about women in the paranormal. Who are some of the key women in the paranormal? I guess we should go back to history and then come closer to the present.
Yeah. So I was talking about the mother of the paranormal. Who is that? And I really have to give that title to Katherine Crowe, who was born in 1803, died in 1876. And, she was living at a time, she was from England. She was living at a time when women could not vote. They couldn't even own property legally in England. And even though she had all those barriers, she was able to become an independent woman. She did get married to an army officer, but something went wrong with that. And in about 1833, she was helped by some friends to escape to Edinburgh, Scotland, which is a great place to escape.
Wait, she escaped her marriage?
So yes.
Okay.
She escaped her marriage, and then she remade herself. She became a famous writer, and she is
amazing,
unknown right now. But in her time, she was very, very famous. And so actually in 1841, she would write the first modern detective story. I know that mantle is usually given to Edgar Allan Poe, and actually he did write Murders at the Rue Morgue the same year. But her book, The Adventures of Susan Hapley, which is about a maidservant who has to solve a murder and clear her brother's name.
Is that her Crowe magnum opus?
Yes, like
eye rolling.
Well, actually, her magnum opus is this. We'll talk about it
Okay.
a little bit. But so 1841, January of 1841, she comes out with this book called The Adventures of Susan Hapley, and Susan Hapley was a servant, but she was a female protagonist who became an investigator throughout the story. And this story this novel was very, very popular across Europe and then into the United States. And then later in April of that year, that's when Poe would publish his short story in a magazine. So many think that maybe he was influenced by her earlier novel. But
so he was influenced by Crowe before being influenced by Raven?
Oh my God, yes.
He's on an eye roll.
I think you missed your calling. You could be a conspiracy theorist, making all these obscure connections.
Yeah, that's probably what it is.
Yeah,
absolutely. But you got to get it out somewhere.
Yeah.
So anyway, after that, she gained like national acclaim for her work as a fiction writer, but she was widely read. Even though she was English, she could read German and French fluently, and because of that, she decided she needed to write some books about the paranormal. And she was heavily into reading German researchers and doctors and physiologists at the time who were into some pretty weird stuff. And she decided in 1845 that she needed to translate one of those works, which was called the Seerest of Prevorst. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But it's a book by Justinus Kerner, who is a famous German physician. And he actually had a patient who was frequently in contact with the spirit world. He came into association with her because he was trying to restore her health. She was very sickly. But in doing that, in attending to her, he experienced so many paranormal things that he wrote a book about it. Katherine Crowe read it, and she said, well, I have to make this available to English audiences. So she translated it in 1845. And then in 1848, she decided she had to publish her own book, which is called The Night Side of Nature. And look how big this thing is. This is like 400 pages.
Wow.
And it, like a lot of people kind of blow this off and say, oh, it's just a bunch of ghost stories, gossip she got from her social circle. But that's not the case. She was looking at, as I said, German theorists and French theorists, and she put a lot of their information in here. And she actually was the researcher who brought the word poltergeist and the word doppelganger, both of those terms, into English usage.
Wow.
So she's not credited. I mean,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
The first one to talk about that. And not only that, there's, of course, numerous stories of apparitions in here, haunted houses, crisis apparitions, but you also find twin telepathy and telekinesis and out-of-body experience, near-death experience. These were things that, those terms weren't even coined yet, but she was talking about it in The Night Side of Nature.
What year was this?
This is 1848. So you'll remember that that spiritualism, the big spiritualist movement in the United States, started in 1847. Now, it didn't really get underway in Britain until 1848. And her book just coincided with the spiritualist movement arriving in Britain. So this book became a huge success and went through 16 editions in just a few years.
Wow.
It was tremendously popular, and even Charles Dickens gave this book a glowing review. But later on, they would find themselves on the opposite sides of a scandal.
Oh,
yes. So I'm not sure exactly why this scandal happened, but I have some ideas about it. So she in 1854 conducted what was probably the first paranormal investigation as we would know it today, where she and some notables, like she took a doctor along with her, she took a clairvoyant along with her to this haunted house in Edinburgh. And so this must have been in January of that year, because the events of the scandal would unfold at the end of February. So around January of 1854, there was this haunted house that she took a crew to, and they did like a stakeout. They had the clairvoyant try to contact the spirit. The clairvoyant actually was touching Katherine Crowe, and when she was touched by the clairvoyant, she began to sense some things that the clairvoyant was sensing. Like she saw some light phenomena, these diamonds of light coming up from the floor. And so that was amazing that, as a woman at that time, that, she's not like some muscly guy like Zach Baggins. What's she doing in the middle of a haunted house? She was a 51-year-old woman, and here she is in a haunted house investigating. And that seems extraordinary to me, that she's conducting this first investigation. And now many paranormal investigators follow that format that she developed.
Absolutely.
And they never know that, they never know anything about her. So then later on,
and she probably had to do it in a corset. So I mean, this is like,
I know, right? Like, how could you even stay conscious in one of those things?
I know, I can't. So.
Yeah,
absolutely. So then later on, yes, let's say no to corsets. So later on, in February of 1854, she was involved in a scandal, and it was largely started probably by Charles Dickens, which is really sad. This is a story
I think you're meaning it was something to do with him, the two of them.
Well, it's a story that really puts the dick in Charles Dickens. Let me just say that. So I'm not sure. I'm still trying to figure out what exactly happened, because the story is probably apocryphal. But there was this mesmerist journal called Zoist. And in the Zoist, this article appeared that said Katherine Crowe was seen wandering the streets of Edinburgh in the nude. And so, of course, everybody's shock, right? And she was in the nude, apparently. And then
in Edinburgh.
In Edinburgh, that's right. And so we don't know if that exactly happened, but we do know that in Charles Dickens' personal correspondence, in at least 2 letters, he gossiped to his friends, calling her, one of the quotes is, she was a medium and an ass, and I don't know what else. And he said that she had gone out in the nude because she was given a card, just a calling card by a spirit, and that she held it a certain way in a certain hand, she would become invisible. So that's this yarn. There's a lot of elaboration in his letters, and you have to ask yourself, how would he know that? And that she was afraid of things that were black and white. And it just, there's so many details in it that it smacks of being a made up story, because and he is telling people that she's in the madhouse now and probably will never get out. That was the content of this gossip to his friends. Now, he was also very well acquainted and very involved in the Zoist, in that mesmerist publication. And so one wonders how that story got in there. Now, what people don't realize about Charles Dickens is he was really, really into mesmerism. And a lot of the mesmerists at that time, if you look at Zoist, were very worried about spiritualism, because before spiritualism came in around late 1848, really mesmerism had the spotlight. And they found, as the years had progressed, that more and more mesmerists were jumping ship to become spiritualists. So what Zoist tried to do in several articles is paint spiritualists as madmen and mad women, or to say that don't go over to the spiritualist side because it'll make you crazy. Right. So Katherine Crowe is not the only person that was targeted by that publication, but you can see with the popularity of The Night Side of Nature that she was kind of a poster child for everything they hated, although she loved mesmerism.
But they felt threatened by her somehow.
So that's kind of
these other people who were targeted. Sorry to interrupt, but the other people who were targeted, were they predominantly women or men and women?
They were men and women.
Okay, so it wasn't a sexist issue necessarily.
It wasn't a sexist issue necessarily, but I think because she had become so prominent because of The Night Side of Nature, that there was some motivation in that, because later she would write about spiritualism, although The Night Side of Nature is not about spiritualism. In fact, there's a lot of mesmerism in here. She talks about possession as well as poltergeists, and she suggests, from the researchers that she read, that the way to cure someone who is possessed by a spirit is through mesmerism, or what we know as hypnosis today. So she was trying to go at this from a scientific perspective, and that's and instead of promoting the Roman Rite, she promoted thought was a little bit more scientific.
So this should be in the public domain now, the book, I mean.
It is. It's completely free.
Is it? So there's like a Kindle version I could get? Yeah, so probably.
Not sure about Kindle, but what I do is, of course, I have the print copy, but because it was written in the 19th century, I like to listen to it. So I downloaded the book, the PDF from Project Gutenberg, and then I have voice software that reads it to me like
that's nice.
And I programmed it to have a British female voice that I thought sounded like Katherine Crowe.
Perfect. So the 19th century female voice.
This is my bedtime story, is The Night Side of Nature.
Well, I'm really keen to have a look at that, because I'm just wondering how much the modern stories and modern theories have been influenced by that book without us knowing.
Right, absolutely. And see, that's what I see in it, that there's so much in there that is being carried on today, but we don't give any credit to any of these older stories.
It's always good to go back to the primary text when you can. That's it for sure.
Absolutely.
You never know what you're going to find too. That's always fun. So
yes. So certainly Katherine Crowe was a big surprise. She has 2 other books out that are on the paranormal. They both came out in 1859. One is called Ghost and Family Legends, and the other is called Spiritualism and the Age We Live in. But I still think her best work in terms of its breadth and depth has to be The Night Side of Nature, because she deals with so many different phenomena and talks about their earliest beginnings.
Do you know, is the Zoist magazine, is that available online or digitized somewhere?
I have found, different snippets of articles, but I don't think the whole thing is online. That's a really good question.
Yeah.
But
I only ask because if it'd be really cool to like have that as well. That'd be nice to be able to get back to that primary material. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I also need to talk about the SPR, the Society for Psychic Research, because this book, this edition of The Night Side of Nature is from the Colin Wilson Library of the Paranormal. And Colin Wilson actually felt that he was a prominent existentialist, but also wrote on the paranormal. And he actually felt that Katherine Crowe should have been credited by the SPR as well, because a lot of the methods that she laid the groundwork for, they would later perfect. And, but they never mention her. But another great researcher from the SPR was Eleanor Sidgwick. And she was the president of the SPR twice, 1908 and actually, I think 1932 was the other one. But anyway, she was a scientist and a women's rights activist and a mathematician. So there's a story about her going to visit Egypt with her family, and she and her brother-in-law actually spent a lot of time away from the sites, just doing math problems. So they were in Egypt, but they like to do math problems so much that was her focus. So when she was part of the SPR, she helped them with a huge survey of hallucinations that actually became the book Phantasms of the Living. So Phantasms of the Living is about crisis apparitions. You guys know what crisis apparitions are?
I think we know them as grief hallucinations or bereavement hallucinations. I think it's probably the same thing.
Yeah,
term.
It's similar, but crisis hallucinations, the ones that they were looking for, were apparitions of someone who had been living, and it's like Grandpa appears at the foot of your bed, and you're like, "Hey, Grandpa, it's the middle of the night." And then he disappears.
Here we go again.
And then, right, Grandpa.
Then you find out he's passed.
But you find out that he's passed, and you take it as some kind of message. So what the SPR did is they actually surveyed 17,000 people across Europe, and they received almost 3,000 reports of crisis apparitions from those respondents. And then, what she did is she helped figure out, well, what would be the chances of, this many authentic cases? But they didn't weed down the cases. They didn't just take all like 3,000. They were like, okay, were there 2 witnesses? Is it confirmed that it was within 12 hours of death? They did all these things to try to whittle it down, and then came up with 32 solid cases that could not be explained. And then she was able to show that that even though it started out with 3,000, it got to 32 because they had all those requirements that they wanted the case to meet before they really deemed it unexplained. And she mathematically determined that it was over 400 times chance, the amount of apparitions. So she was doing her best to look at things very analytically. And actually, another thing that she was known for is being very skeptical of spiritualist photography and being very outspoken about fraud. And she was criticized, during that time, for that skepticism.
That's an important development.
Yes. But she said, "Oh my God!"
They slip right by.
Sorry.
I'm
trying to stay focused.
Yeah. Oh,
impossible.
You insufferable. So now where was I? So she was
400 times chance. Yep.
Yes, she was criticized for her skepticism, but her point was, I'm not saying that I don't believe or don't think these things are possible. I think they occasionally happen, and I want to accurately estimate how often they happen. So I have to separate the wheat from the chaff.
You have to expose the fraud.
Yes, absolutely. And so she was one of the first. She was one of the first vocal critics of that type of fraud. And so you can read Phantasms of the Living. I don't know if that's free, but it's very low cost if it's not free. And she also was a wonderful speaker and promoter of women's rights and suffrage, and wrote a lot on those topics as well.
Very cool.
And
interesting crossover. So you mentioned Rose Mackenberg a little while ago, and we've been talking a little bit about spiritualism too. Can you tell us about her? She's a really interesting character.
Yeah, so Rose Mackenberg, she was born in 1892. She died in 1968, and she was Houdini's Ghostbuster. That's what I like to call her, because
the woman behind the man, right?
Yes, because again, he gets the credit, but she did a lot of the legwork. She was his top female investigator. There were other female investigators that worked with her, including Houdini's one of Houdini's relatives, his niece, I believe, Julia Sawyer, actually worked with Rose Mackenberg to expose fake spiritualists, fake mediums. So what she would do is Houdini would plan shows in different cities. And so she would go out ahead of Houdini, like about a week or so ahead. And then she'd dress in disguise, making herself look like a shut eye, as they were called in by the psychic mafia. That shut eye was a gullible individual, an easy mark. And so what she did is she would dress as, a widow, or some of her disguises. Let's see, the smartly garbed widow, the rustic school teacher, the small town matron. So she was this master of disguise, and she had all these different personas.
We need those pictures. It's a shame that we aren't able to show the slides, because
they are fantastic.
They are beautiful. We'd have to include them in the show notes or somewhere.
Included pictures in a series of articles a series of syndicated articles that she would write for newspapers. And I actually found that that information, along, I think, with an unpublished parts of an unpublished manuscript by Rose Mackenberg, are now available. I did not know that.
Really?
So there is a book that you can get about all her adventures.
She has Where's Waldo's glasses. She's got these perfectly round spectacles.
All the rage then, yeah.
They're really cool looking. Yeah.
Like the small town matron is
I love her disguises.
Wearing those glasses, right? And so
what a great job.
Yeah. So what she would do is she would gather intelligence on these fake mediums, and she would do things like, she would pay them a little bit to contact like her dead husband, for example, and so that they would contact her dead husband, supposedly, and then they'd say, they'd give like a quick, like dismissive message, and then they'd say, "Oh, I'm sorry, he's gone." And one of her quotes is, "Oh no, well, what am I going to do with that $3,000?" Like, wait a minute, I think I can get him back.
Yeah.
And then they would try to involve her in a scam, if not paying them directly, investing in some fake corporation, and then she would take that information to insurance companies. She also worked for families, in addition to working for Houdini. And so then after she accumulated all this information for Houdini over the week of being in that city, when he would come to town, she would join him on stage and they would debunk the local mediums. But that's how he did that, because she gathered the information for him.
Fantastic.
And I also want to talk about somebody who isn't well known, named Zora Neale Hurston. She was an African-American folklorist, anthropologist, writer, and she was born in 1891 and died in 1960. And again, not a great time for women, especially African-American women, but she somehow smashed through those barriers and was able to go to the Deep South, for example, and embed herself in hoodoo culture and learn all about the spells and the beliefs of that magical system, which she believed was actually a fully formed religion. And then later on, she would get a grant to live in Jamaica and then later in Haiti, and to learn about voodoo culture in the Caribbean. And she wrote a great book about voodoo culture called Tell My Horse, Voodoo and Life in Haiti and Jamaica. Now, this book came out in the 30s, I believe. And in the book, she talks about her experiences with zombies. Now, again, when you think of zombies, you think of maybe Wade Davis, The Serpent and the Rainbow, or you don't think of an African-American woman going to Haiti, becoming a practitioner, and actually learning about the religion from the inside and meeting people who were victims of zombification. Now, she did not believe that zombies were individuals that were raised from the dead. She believed it was drug-induced, which again is something that Wade Davis is famous for, but she was talking about it in the 1930s.
Wow.
So she actually claimed to meet and substantiate at least one zombie who was a woman who died in 1907, and she came to light in 1936. So wow, that's a long time to be away from your family. But she interviewed this woman, took pictures of this woman for her book, and she was able to talk to the Haitian government. They verified that she was the same woman, and the family verified that she was the same woman. But again, that's okay, because she wasn't really dead. That's what Zora believes. She wasn't really dead. That, she was, there was some drugging going on that create zombies. And she talked about, the beliefs of, how to keep a zombie going. And there were worries among the slave owners who would use the zombies in the fields, for example, there were things like they didn't give them salt because they thought that would start bringing the memories back. So she did a lot of amazing work on zombies at the time. And does anybody even remember that? They don't. They think of Wade Davis and Serpent and the Rainbow.
No,
Sure,
but I look forward to. I want to track that down. That looks really interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to add too that zombie is, I think, either a snake god or a spirit in voodoo as well. So it can get a bit confusing too, talking about different kinds of zombies.
Yes. So yes, there is a serpent and the rainbow in Haitian voodoo. But I don't think the actual Loas, as they're known, and the main gods are really part of zombification. It's more of a social construction. It's something that was used to attack people and to get rid of them or to make them your slave. It's not I mean, it's kind of sad that it's associated with the religion so much because, there's practitioners of the, I would say probably most of the practitioners of the religion are really good people who have a moral foundation. They're not interested in doing what a Beaucourt might do. I
think it's mostly white magic and not.
That's right. That's right. But anyway, read that book, Tell My Horse. There's a lot of great books out there. And I think the point of what I'm trying to do, and I'm doing it for myself too. I mean, I just found out about Zora Neale Hurston and I just started the book. But it's an education for me too, because, watching paranormal TV, listening to podcasts, you don't usually hear about these people or the history of paranormal investigation. And, now is a great time to investigate these people that have been largely forgotten, because a lot of the paranormal conferences, all the conferences in the world have been canceled. But, this is a time during summer when we usually go to paranormal conferences and you can't do that, but you can still reach out and, read a lot of these books either for free or for a very low cost.
Mm-hmm. This is a really interesting topic. And why do you think that the paranormal has been and has become such a man's world?
Well, I think maybe that has to do with television. Because in parapsychology, for example, you find that there are a lot of women involved in parapsychology. But when you get a TV show, for example, you're not going to see a parapsychology study. You're going to see a bunch of tough guys, usually going into a haunted house and trying to go mano a mano with the big bad, and that's just because of the way TV works. So what I guess producers think that's what people are interested in. And I hope that's not true. I mean, certainly that's not what I'm interested in. But I think it's been skewed. What the reality in the paranormal field has been skewed by TV. And that's a disservice, because there are, I think, a lot more female investigators than there are male investigators even today.
Yeah, I mean, when you actually go to local ghost groups, I see a lot of women represented a lot of times in leadership positions, but not on TV. Yeah.
I think on TV is not reflective of reality. They call it reality TV. It couldn't be any further from the truth. Sorry, go ahead, Karen.
Oh, I was just going to say that the roles that women play on those shows are pretty pathetic. Just someone who's, in the background screaming and
right,
usually sexy characters, that kind of thing. They're really, really minimized and
here's the thing about what you see in the media, especially. There are roles that as a society we are okay with giving women. Like, you could be a poltergeist agent, you could be a medium, you could be a psychic, you could be an evil ghost yourself. But it's very seldom that you see any actual investigators. And if you do on those TV shows, they're usually very young and nubile. They're not like Katherine Crowe, who was out there when she's 50 years old.
Naked.
Well, we don't know about that. I think that was an attempt to discredit her. Oh no, she's
absolutely
naked. Today nobody would care, but back then it was a big deal to try to discredit her. She did come forward. I didn't finish that story. She did come forward and say, look, I did have gastric difficulties. I was sick, but the story is completely apocryphal. But like a good story, everybody loves a good story. They're not going to let you shut it down just because it's not true.
Although it is a great version of the Lady Ghost Diva story.
Absolutely. So yeah, she hotly denied that any of that was the least bit true. And
just people do people actually get naked in Edinburgh? I don't know. It seems
too cold.
It's like, I mean,
well,
yeah,
that's the thing. It was
exactly. That's why
February.
it seems like a really ridiculous thing. So
It was February, so
Yeah.
it probably did not happen. But it was
yeah,
a
I'm
convenient
thinking
way to
not the
discredit her.
insane asylum, maybe the morgue.
Great story.
Yeah, so yeah.
Right. And it's hard to kill a good story. Nobody cares about the more banal truth.
Yeah.
And there's so many more women I could talk about, but I don't know how we're doing on time.
We're doing well. I mean, we started 10 minutes late.
Oh, okay.
So I feel like if we go another 15 minutes, we'll be fine.
Okay, that sounds good. So I want to talk a little bit about Alexandra David-Neel. She was another woman who was just incredible because nobody told her that sexism was on in the 1860s when she was born. Nobody held her down because by the time she was 16, she was already running away from home, exploring different parts of Europe. She was Belgian, by the way, but that didn't stop her from just going all over.
Okay, sorry.
Yes, she just went everywhere. You could not keep her down. And then when she was 21, she actually slipped away to India. So
like you do.
She made things possible, even though this was a very difficult time for women. She also, started her career as an opera singer, so that gave her some ability to travel. And then in midlife, she would finally get married and settle down. And then her husband is like, "Oh, I know you have this wanderlust, so I'm going to send you on a trip to get it out of your system." And he thought maybe she'd be gone to Asia for maybe a year, and she came back 14 years later. So
wow.
So
I hope she didn't take the credit card. So
they were still together.
Yeah,
still married.
Yeah, they were still married after 14 years. She went home. So kind of an unusual relationship there. But she went to Asia and lived in Bhutan and Nepal and all these different countries in Asia. And she was fascinated by Buddhism. And she wanted to learn everything she could. And she wanted to get into places where Westerners couldn't go. So at one of her retreats, she adopted a 14-year-old boy, and he decided to go with her. There's nothing untoward here. But he helped her disguise herself because he would take on the role of a young lama, and she was supposed to be his
religious leader, not the camel. Right, got it. Right.
Not the quadruped. Although that might have been nice because they were caught in Himalayan snowstorms and nearly died. But anyway, a llama would have been a lot warmer than a llama. So her friend would disguise himself as a young llama, and she would disguise herself as his aging mother. And she dyed her hair with black Chinese ink, and she would take soot from the bottom of the pot and disguise her skin color. And somehow, doing that in 1924, they broke into the city of Lhasa in Tibet, which was forbidden to Westerners. And she still was able to get in there. And she was also able to forge relationships with monks at many different monasteries. And they taught her a lot of their ancient secrets, like, for example, tumo, which is the ability to control your body heat, which seemed like a supernatural ability, but now we know today with Wim Hof that it does seem that there is some scientific backing behind that, because he is teaching tumo to everyone now. But so she was the first one to identify tumo and talk widely about levitation, but she also would bring the concept of the tulpa back to Westerners, which the tulpa is that thought form creature that Buddhist monks thought that, with certain powers of mind, you could create this mental form that would show itself in real life in 3D space. And so she tried her hand at that, and she was able to produce a jolly, like, Friar Tuck type character. And so she would see him every once in a while, but over time, supposedly he developed this mean streak. And then, of course, she had to destroy him. So, so she talks about all of these different adventures that she had, you know, some on the very paranormal side and some just having to do with relations between Westerners and Eastern thought. But she was an extraordinary woman to be able to do that at that time and bring all this knowledge back. And she has about 30 books, but her most well-known are Magic and Mystery in Tibet and My Journey to Lhasa. So those are two books that people might want to check out. I also
we did talk about her. We talked about her with Joe Nickel and Natasha Michaels about the story of the tulpa and how it got changed. She has a giant footprint in the paranormal world, even though her name's not well known, I think. But the idea of tulpas has become really explosively popular since really the mid 90s, maybe late 90s.
Yeah. And people don't realize that, again, just like with Katherine Crowe and the words poltergeist and doppelganger, they don't realize where this came from. And, you know, that this does go back in history, and they don't go back and read the original documents. And they're exciting reads. So I would encourage everyone to do that. And I would encourage everybody, there are a couple of women right now in parapsychology that are prominent, and they also offer a chance for people to study parapsychology at home, which is another great thing because, you know, who knows with COVID, you know, whether we would be able to go to classes, but these two women offer video conferencing classes. One of them is in Edinburgh. Carolyn Watt is the head of the parapsychology unit there. And every spring and fall, she offers a class in parapsychology. And she has, you know, all the big speakers, you know, on both sides of the fence, talk to students. And she's written a couple of textbooks. One of the textbooks you use in the class, but this one is not cheap. It's 400 pounds. But I'm saving up for September. Maybe I'll see you in the class. But there's a free one that I think more people should know about. Every year in January and February, Dr. Nancy Zangroni of the Rhine Research Center has something called ParaMOOC. And MOOC is just an educational term. It means a massively open online course. And again, this is video conferencing with presenters, with researchers in the field who deliver a lecture, and it's very much like college. It is very academic, but I love it because you get to log on, you get to see this person present, and then you get to ask them questions and also chat with people from around the world that are taking the class. And she's offered these classes every January and February for about a decade now. And I want more people to know about it because it's absolutely free, and you get you know, good understanding. You get your foot in the door as far as some of this parapsychology research, and people aren't taking advantage of that, even though it's free. So I think that's really sad that when I log in, I don't see like 300 people. I see like 20. So that's another opportunity that people might want to think about for the future for this next January and February.
Well, you know, it's funny because I think maybe for a lot of reasons, you find that people are really interested in learning about the paranormal at the TV level. They like a TV show. But actually wanting to look back at the history of the field and see what's actually happened over the past 150 years is too much like school, too much like work. And they miss out and they don't understand. And they're treading over ground that's already been thoroughly tread, and all kinds of things are happening because they don't have a sense of history.
Absolutely. And I think without knowing our history, how can we go forward?
Absolutely. And I want to add too that a lot of our viewers and listeners might know Carolyn Watts's. I think I'm not sure if they're married or if he's her common law husband, but she lives with Richard Wiseman. So
Really?
Okay.
I think he's the kind of,
I did not know that. Wow.
I don't know if that's still the case or not.
But
But yeah, so they're an interesting power couple.
I did not know that. Wow. Because she's the chair of the department, so he's got it in there.
I'm thinking of a joke about his book 59 Seconds, and I'm just going to keep it to myself.
Too late. More eye rolls.
It must be getting late.
We love Richard and wish he'd come back on the show. So
yeah, we'll have to have him back on again.
But it sounds like we might want to talk to his wife or or partner. I'm not really sure.
Common law wife, partner, de facto.
Maybe you could talk to her before the September class, because it's coming up September 2020, where they offer another parapsychology class through University of Edinburgh.
Cool.
Definitely. And I don't know if you want to get into this, but Blake and I have talked a little bit in the past and certainly been subjected to some issues with sexism and harassment in skepticism. And I know that there's a lot of that going on within the paranormal community as well. Do you want to make any comments about that, or would you rather leave it?
Well, I think what I've experienced of late, and actually I experienced it 2 years ago when I was on Monster Quest last as well, from the same people. I think it's very telling if people cannot deal with you with the details or on the issues. They very often resort to ad hominem attacks, and so that's what I've been experiencing. And these people that have been very vocal publicly and privately trying to disparage me because I ask questions and I'm not shy about it. They were revealed, and some of their comments seemed misogynistic. And I think the distinction is, although they do bully others, the men that the researchers that I work with who have been bullied by them are mainly just been called names, like the A word and so forth. And in my case, what keeps coming up in the comments between these gentlemen is that they'd like to slap me, or the latest comment was they want to give me a bath in the Ohio River, which is especially crass because of all the people that lost loved ones in the Silver Bridge disaster of December 15th, 1967. In the Ohio River. So I think the distinction, because people are like, well, why is it misogynist? I think I would rather if they just called me a name rather than saying something violent about me. That's the scary part. That's the distinction that I'm seeing with the other people that they disagree with. They call them every name in the book, but they don't say anything threatening. Right. Where I'm involved, they say threatening things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I can totally see that. And I think absolutely if they were dealing with men instead, they'd be saying very different things. They wouldn't be traversing that kind of territory.
Yes. So
I don't really have much to say about this. It's horrible. But I've never had to experience. I mean, obviously, aside from all the people who want me for my body, I've never had to deal with any of this.
Yes.
Now that I think about it, I've never had to deal with any of this.
Well, it is. I think it's another one of those common ground things where it's a problem within skepticism and it's a problem within the paranormal movement. And we're just glad that you're doing all of the excellent research that you're doing and the investigation. And you've got to keep it up and just, as much as you can, ignore these people or just call
like
them out.
Eleanor Sidgwick said, it's not that I'm saying I don't believe or I'm trying to debunk because I think it's not possible. I'm trying to separate the wheat from the chaff. And I think that's what any good investigator does, no matter your personal beliefs. And if somebody disagrees with my findings, that's perfectly fine. But let's keep it to that. Let's keep it to the issues and talk about that, not talk about assaulting each other or even call names. I don't think that's appropriate.
Absolutely.
That's not part of discourse.
Not professional.
We should be able to talk about our differences in a civil manner. And once they're willing to do that, hey, I'd be glad to debate.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I want to say thanks for bringing these people to the attention of our listeners and viewers. And
some really interesting characters. And I just still think we should end, because we always end our show when we do our regular shows by asking, what's your favorite monster? But I think give you an opportunity to talk about one more woman if you'd like to. But who do you think is your favorite woman in the paranormal?
Well, I'd have to say it was Katherine Crowe, because she did so many amazing things in terms of firsts. The first modern detective story, the first one to use poltergeist in English language usage. And, she was first in many other things that aren't named in the Night Side of Nature. So I'd have to say it's Katherine Crowe. And also, even though she was unjustly maligned, she kept on writing and did some amazing work. She even did a children's edition of Uncle Tom's Cabin. So she was a very modern woman, even though she was born into the upper class in England. She did think more about the people at large than just her privileged circle. So that's why I would have to say Katherine Crowe, and she also represents my favorite monster, which is the poltergeist, because they manifest in so many just nonsensical ways that you can't believe that people would make up. I mean, it's possible that they maybe could, but it's a high strangeness type of monster that sometimes doesn't even make sense, but yet people report experiencing these very strange manifestations. So I would say Katherine Crowe and poltergeist.
Certainly the kind of ghost I'd love to explore. That's if I could ever get onto a live hot poltergeist case, that would be like the best one.
I know, right?
Yeah.
There's so many ways they manifest too. Like there could be a fire starter, or it could rain inside, or yes, there could be a rain of. I read about one poltergeist case, and kind of crosses over into possession too, where one of the priests that was examining this young girl, he went home and he was trying to eat breakfast, and a shower of rain. A rain of worms came down into his breakfast cereal, and so I just
that's spectacular.
Yeah,
I'd like to see that. Yeah,
spectacular.
We used to have beetles in our cereal in the Navy, but that was just bad cereal.
Oh.
All right. Well, Allison, thank you so much for joining us. Remember, you can support the show. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, keep on doing everything that you're doing.
Thank you, Karen.
And we'll put. I'd like to put maybe some of the images into the show notes for when we put this out. And and you can find us. Don't forget, please subscribe. That really helps us a lot. And if you want to support the show, you can support us at patreon.com/MonsterTalk. Oh, and Allison,
like our videos as well.
Yeah, where can people find you, Allison?
Well, they can look at my YouTube channel. How about that? YouTube.com/Mothman, but it's not just Mothman. Of course, I have my videos up there of all the Mothman sighting locations in Chicagoland of 2011 and 2017, some 60 videos. But also look in the playlist, because I have haunted road trips where I just stayed at haunted places and skulk around the hallways and get staff to talk to me. So there's some interesting stuff there, as well as paranormal interviews. I get bored, I just call up people like Magnus, the headmaster of the elf school in Reykjavik, Iceland, and I did a whole Skype interview with him. So
Nice.
there's a lot of interviews up there that I think people would really like as well.
Fantastic.
All right. I want to say goodnight to everybody.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. Yeah,